Hey everyone. So today I want to talk about a cartoon TV show that really stole my heart. Not cartoon. It's called Samurai Jack, and it was one of the top shows on the top networks for kids when I was a kid growing up. See, back in the day, now I'm starting to sound old, but back in the day, and I know a lot of people watching are millennials, so they can relate. We didn't have internet. We had TV, and one of the main TV channels, there weren't that many that were really that good. There was Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon and Disney Channel. And at one point there was Fox Kids, but then that one got acquired and disappeared. But um, Cartoon Network was like the show, the channel to watch. And basically, I saw Samurai Jack on there and only watched little tidbits of the show here and there, random episodes, and never really got to finish the entire series. I really didn't fully understand what was going on. Like, I knew the general premise, but it was just one of those shows where you would just watch if you were bored one day. But now that I'm an adult, thanks to the coronavirus quarantine and the fact that Cartoon Network released the series for free, I watched this series and I just finished the final episode of season 5. And I was just so blown away by the series that I was compelled to make this video about it. I thought that since, there's a lot of millennial viewers, it could be a good bonding experience for all of us to kind of relate and reminisce about those millennial memories and the nostalgia. But also just because I really wanted to talk about this series because it really struck me. First off, I want to give you a bit more background about my time before I started watching it now, because up until now, I just thought it was just this show. I thought it was a nice to have, fun little show. I didn't really think much about it. But now that I'm watching it as an adult, I see all these nuances. I see how it's in some ways a masterpiece in terms of the artwork, in terms of the storytelling. Now, of course, it's still a kid's show. It is a bit gimmicky at times, but we'll get to that. To really understand where I'm coming from, we have to go back in time, just like Jack, to the beginning. So I watched a lot of TV shows, and to be honest, Samurai Jack was not one of my favorites. There was all sorts out there. There was SpongeBob, Dexter's Lab, Courage the Cowardly Dog, Rugrats. I mean, there's a lot of contenders. Hannah Montana. And Samurai Jack was just a show that there was a lot of hype leading up to it. Like, Cartoon Network did a really good job hyping up their shows with commercials and teasers and countdowns. And I was fairly hyped. Because they gave little teasers, but you didn't really know what the show was about. You didn't know the story until the moment the first episode dropped. And so I was like, oh, what is this new futuristic samurai show? Because they would just show these little teasers. They wouldn't tell you the story. And then it dropped because, on Friday nights, you didn't really have much else to do as a kid. So you stayed up and watched these Friday night tunes where they would release new episodes of all these shows sequentially. And they had this big countdown. And then you saw Samurai Jack, episode 1, season 1. And that's the first time I saw it. And I was like, this was all right, and you got a lot of hype behind it because you were counting down, waiting to see the show. And then you find out, oh man, this is a samurai. He was trained by all the best civilizations across the world, from the Romans to the Africans to the Saudi Arabians or Middle Eastern people, to the Vikings. And then you see his progression and his, you see his backstory, and then you learn that he was thrown into the future to combat Aku, this evil demon. And that, you get the premise of the story. And then from then on, I was just like, oh, this is nice. But then the way TV channels work is that it's not like streaming. You can't just choose your episodes. You have to just tune into the TV channel, and whatever they're playing that day, you have to watch. I mean, thank God for streaming services now. I mean, this was something that was on my mind as a kid. Like, why can't I just choose what I want to watch? Because the problem is, let's just say you're busy that weekend, then you miss an episode, and then you're behind. Or you miss a whole month because you're just busy or you want to do other stuff. Then you just have to flip on the channel and hope that they're playing Samurai Jack. And, well, another way is that you can, like, look up when they schedule episodes and make sure you don't miss it each time they air a new one. But usually what ends up happening is they're just running replays on the most random episodes. And that's why a lot of these episodes have to be very easy to pick up on. And so, like, the plot for a lot of these episodes is just like Samurai Jack's battling another bad guy, and he's still on his quest to defeat Aku. So I would just watch a few, probably less than five episodes total I watched since now. And it was just like random episodes. And I was like, this is a decent show, but nothing crazy. The animation's all right. And, it's the same type of story. He's battling this little boss. He's going to beat him, but at the end of the day, he still doesn't beat Aku. Fast forward like 12, 15 years, and the quarantine happens, and on Reddit and other internet places, I have heard talk about how Samurai Jack is a masterpiece, even for adults, in terms of the animation style, the creativity, the design element, as well as the story, but mostly the design element. So I was like, okay, I have some free time. I'm going to watch the series. Because I saw some news saying that Cartoon Network had dropped the whole series for free thanks to the coronavirus. Now, was it free before? Was it just some PR stunt? Who knows? But I ended up watching the series. I didn't watch every episode. I went to Reddit again, and they posted a list of the essential episodes you had to watch. Because I didn't want to watch every single episode because a lot of it's kind of repetitive. And there were certain essential episodes that actually contributed to the plot. So I watched all of those, which took me about 2 weeks on and off. And, I was watching other stuff while watching that. So I was watching Jessica Jones and Avatar: The Last Airbender, which I'm also catching up on. Because same type of deal with that show. I didn't watch it as a kid except for random episodes. And that's also a masterpiece, by the way. But anyhow, it took me about 2 weeks. And then this last few days, I binge watched season 5, and season 5 is a whole nother flair to it. It's dark, it's more mature. There's a couple adult jokes thrown in. There was a penis joke that was casually thrown in there, and then the romance is definitely more adult, and it's much darker. It's much more pessimistic, hopeless, cruel in certain ways, or at least you see more horrible deaths. And then it ended, and the ending was so sad. And I'm not going to spoil anything, but the ending was bittersweet, to say the least. And I was just so... At first, I didn't like the ending. I was like, why couldn't they make it just happy? And then that just stuck with me for a long time afterwards. Well, technically, I watched the last episode last night, and now it's 24 hours later, but I'm still kind of I just feel so many emotions from that, and I think you should watch the series. I'm going to title this video something like why you should watch Samurai Jack, but I guess for the people who haven't seen it, I think it's a simple show, and it's great for kids, but at the same time, the artwork is amazing. It changes every episode. The storyline starts basic, but new characters keep getting added in throughout. And then by the end, it gets a little bit deeper than you would think. I think I did some research, and the creator of the show really wanted it to be true to the character and the story by ending it the way it did. And it's very reminiscent of kind of I guess, Buddhist philosophy. It's reminiscent of life, and I was just so blown away by the ending. It was just like so amazing. Um, and I might even title this video something else, because now I want to start talking about the ending. Um, but it was, I guess, the show still, if you take it at point blank, it is still a bit of a kid show. It's cartoony, but there's definitely very deep moments. There's very samurai moments, Japanese moments, but it's a global show. It's a show that represents globalism. I mean, this show would never have existed 50, 100 years ago, because it's not just about Japanese culture. It's all these cultures together. And then there's sci-fi futuristic elements too. It's a very unique theme to it, because from the get-go, you have this Japanese child who gets shuttled around to all these different civilizations across the entire globe, um, and learns all these different martial arts and practices and philosophies and ways of thinking to prepare him to fight the ultimate demon. And it's just so magical. I just love globalism in a way, because you get to see how all these different cultures and phenomenons connect. And that's how I was thinking about when I was watching the show, because there's so many different cultures. I mean, you see Jack be trained in African martial arts styles, and Viking styles, and Roman styles, and Trojan styles, and uh, Buddhist monk styles, Shaolin styles, all these crazy things. And it's incredible, it's remarkable, and it's amazing that the world has allowed that, because 100 years ago, 200 years ago, that wasn't a place. That wasn't necessarily how things were. 500 years ago, you were just stuck in your city, in your culture. But we have this very fascinating time in our life where all these different cultures are meshing and merging, and we do see racism and fighting and negative parts of that. But at the same time, the show, I think, while it had its dark moments, it emphasized the positive elements of how these cultures could respect each other and work together, and learn from each other. And that's something that I really marveled at. I was reading the Bruce Lee biography by Matthew Polly, and this was like 50 years ago, but even then, you could see the effects of globalism taking effect. Bruce Lee grew up in Hong Kong, and despite that, he had all these elements of globalism going on, certain music, certain African music from the United States had permeated over. Certain types of swing dancing were permeating over. That's why he was a big fan of dance. And then from the Latin countries, people loved certain types of salsa and Latin dances, and those type of dances made its way over to Hong Kong. And that's how Bruce Lee became a salsa champion for this young adult age group for one of the local tournaments in Hong Kong, which he later marketed as, being the Hong Kong, dance champion. And so you saw this globalism happen. And then even when Bruce Lee moved to the U.S., he intermingled with African communities, with Hispanic communities, with white communities. Even when they didn't want him, even when they would fight back or would get jealous when he would get girlfriends from those different communities. I just marveled at the amazing, unique blend of culturalism that's happening. And I saw that in Samurai Jack. And then, you saw all the friendships and the bonds form, and then the show ended season 4 in the most unclimactic episode. It was just yet another repetitive episode, and you didn't see Jack vanquish Aku, and it just ended like that. And it was very disappointing. And luckily, when I was watching it, season 5 was right there. So something happened. I don't know the exact details, but it seems like 11 years later, the creator got back with his team and was able to film and create a final season 5 to kind of give closure to the whole thing. So that was excellent. It was so incredible. And season 5 was just definitely much darker. There's a time skip. It's much more mature. The animation quality also jumped up a notch, which was crazy. And you finally get to see closure. You finally get to see all Samurai Jack's friends that he's made over the years unite, come together, reunite, make bonds and stuff like that. And of course, I had a whole bunch of emotions with the ending because it was a very divisive ending for a lot of fans because a lot of people didn't like the ending because I mean a lot of things didn't happen the way people wanted them to, and so it was very divisive for a lot of people. It upset a lot of people, and that was rather unfortunate. And I could see that. I could see certain things that weren't really happy, um, but I think ultimately, you regardless of the little tweaks and turns, you get the general gist that Samurai Jack made it happen. He made it happen. He lived happily ever after, and that's what matters most. And of course, there were some sacrifices, some unhappy things, but I did some research on the general creator's purpose and intention, and I liked the general idea. At first I was kind of upset about the ending, but his main goal was to say that a completely happy ending would not have served the character correctly, because uh, essentially he was someone who, by his nature, by the show's nature, and by the philosophy of the show, which is more emblematic of the real world. Like he wanted to represent the real world rather than just this fantasy fiction world where everything's happy, because that's not what happens in the real world. He wanted to show that in life there's suffering. In life there's sacrifices that have to be made sometimes, and there is suffering that comes with life. So, he got that happy ending, but with some suffering, and I thought it was fantastic. And there's obviously a bunch of haters and critics, and they were like, "Oh well, you should have ended this way and that way." And I thought it was excellent that the creator went out and said that he didn't care what the fans said. He saw this as a work of art, and as the artist, he wanted it done a certain way, and he was very proud of his work, and that's how it was done. And I think the world needs people with that perspective. Of course, from a business perspective, from sometimes a financial perspective, of course, you want to get constant feedback from the fans. But sometimes you just want that work of art to be the way it is because of your artistic passion. And that's how it happened. And in fact, I think even from a financial or a fan perspective, at least for me, I thought it was great. It did leave me very sad and unhappy for a bit, but now I've kind of resolved, and this video has been therapeutic as well because I think it was a great show and it ended, I think, how it should. I'm so glad it got closure, and I'm glad that you know all in all, Jack was happy. Um, and I know there's all these critics, and I mean, armchair critics are like, well, he massacred these people at the end, and now all those relationships and people that he's met over the years is gone, and blah blah blah. But those people clearly haven't seen enough time travel stories as I have, because I mean, they're not gone. They will still be there as the future unfolds, and who knows? Maybe Samurai Jack will live long enough or find some extra time portal for him to meet his friends once again and form those relationships again. You never know. I think that would have been the ultimate happy ending, the most realistic one that's kind of happy. But I think I like this one, the actual one that they ended the best, because you need some suffering in life. And I wasn't expecting to go all Buddha and philosophical there, but what a masterpiece. I'm probably going to go back and watch all the episodes that weren't essential that I missed. They're probably not going to be as good, but I think despite it being a kid's show, I really liked it. And I think it definitely, I now put it a little echelon higher than the other Cartoon Network shows, because those other shows were definitely very repetitive. Oh, it's entertaining, but at the end of the day, everything resumes to normal at the end of every episode, which was kind of what Samurai Jack was. But with this one, it actually has closure. It has from start to beginning, middle to end, and you finally see Jack vanquish his foe. For the other Cartoon Network shows, I don't know if that ever happened or would really fit happening. Like with Courage the Cowardly Dog, I mean, I'll probably go back and figure out what happened, but I don't think anything really happened. It was always just a series of bad, unfortunate events that happened to the dog, and it was just this constant repetitive, creepy style. But this show had a deeper meaning. It had a beginning and a assumed end, and I'm so glad they created a season 5 rather than just leave it hanging forever in season 4, because now it's become a work of art, a masterpiece, rather than this repetitive show. And I believe that I will show this show to my children one day, to my son, and it'll be as incredible to them as it was to me. Um, it really gets you thinking too. There's a lot of little life lessons in the show, um, beyond just the final season. Like a few episodes were just very beautiful, to say the least. Um, yeah, I'm still gonna have to do a lot of thinking and stuff, but I guess ultimately what I'm saying is that I miss Jack. I wish he was a real person, um, so I could hug him, so I could be his friend. But I know that's ridiculous because the whole show is kind of ridiculous, and I'm glad that he's happy and he got his more or less happy ending. And I think it's